Okay, so thank you so much and welcome to your group today. We just have rebranded everything for the Pakistan user group, and this is where we are going to talk about today's talk with Rami and we what we are doing over here. I'll just Before we jump into the actual talks today, I would really like to thank all the volunteers who have been working hard to bring this community up in Pakistan, especially, and also thanks for all the speakers who have already given so many talks and their time and most importantly attendees, because without heavy attendees no event can be successful, and this is the biggest motivations for all the speakers including myself and Rami. So thank you so much for all the attendees joining us and learning and sharing your experience with us. uh, this is the place I just created this group just to reduce the gaps between the people, so that if now we are all living in a world, as someone rightly mentioned, like we are getting, this world is getting smaller and smaller for people to live, and we want to move to the Mars. So the one of the biggest reasons is like in pandemic we came very close to each other. We and to get a benefit out of this opportunity, we decided, okay, let's create a community, and then we can help the people within a community to upskill them, to learn, to train them, and also learn from them at the same time. So it's a very small community for now. It's getting bigger and bigger. So if any one of you wants to join our channels, like very easy way, just go to the LinkedIn and search for Pakistan User Group and Meetup and YouTube. Uh, I haven't got a chance to update these PowerPoint slides, but we recently got a new website with pakistanug.com. Please do go and check that website. And I'm very excited for the upcoming event. I'm not going to disclose one in this call, but I would like you to please go and check the website. So you will see the biggest name in Microsoft Dynamics community. That person is coming, and he's going to be a keynote speaker in Pakistan User Group. So that's the big hooray for Pakistan User Group. And thank you so much for all the support from the people like Rami. So today's talk, Rami is going to present, and I'll just quickly hand over to Rami to you here.
Cool. Thank you very much. So I'll put myself in spotlight. Okay, cool. So hopefully everybody can see me and everyone can hear me as well. Oops, I got the green screen, so just give me a second. Is that better? Cool.
Yep.
So thank you everybody for attending this session. For those of you that speak Arabic, Assalamu alaikum. I'll talk a little bit about myself and what the topic of today is going to be. I've got two goals today. The first one is I'm on a world tour. I'm sort of traveling the world virtually, and I would like to introduce new ways of doing presentations. And today, as you can see in the background, I've got some nice moving parts, and then shortly, just with a quick click, you can see that I've got the slides right next to me. I want to introduce a new interactive way of presenting, of engaging with your online audience. So today we're going to talk about Dataverse linked to Synapse. So for those of you that haven't heard of that, it's the same as the export to data lake, a function that has been available in Dynamics 365 CE or CRM for a while and has been greatly enhanced recently. So we'll talk about some of those enhancements. So first of all, a little bit about myself. I'm Rami. I'm originally from a country called Lebanon, which is a really, really small country on the Mediterranean. And I speak three languages. Arabic is my first language, French is my second language, and English is my third language, obviously. I know some other languages, but probably not enough to have a conversation, but maybe to swear or to say naughty things. I've been living in New Zealand for the last 15 years. New Zealand is what I call home right now. I've got a family and a stable job and so on. And during the years, I've worked intensively with Dynamics 365 or CRM 4.0 as used to be called back then. And out of that experience, I wrote a book called the Dynamics 365 Extensions Cookbook. It's probably a little bit dated. I wrote it maybe about 2-3 years ago. A new version should be written, I guess, but it just takes too long to write a book. So maybe in the next year, if I've got a little bit of free time, I might look at releasing a newer version with the latest features. And last but not least, I am an MVP, and I've been an MVP since 2015, which means that, part of the MVP program, we got a little bit of insight on some of the new features that are coming up in Dynamics 365 or business applications in general, Power Platform, and so on. And whatever I can, I share it with the community. Or if I get a heads up about something that I'm really passionate about, I might prepare a little bit of a presentation or a blog, a video, and then once it goes live, then I can go and share my thoughts and then, be one of the first to talk about that new feature. So really exciting times right now. So I just want to spend a couple of minutes talking about that world tour that I'm doing right now. So for those of you that are like me, a child of the 80s, you probably recognize the theme that I've got in there. So this is a Street Fighter 2 theme, a game that I loved when I was a kid and I played intensely. And basically what that represents is me going virtually from one country to the other, sharing some of my Dynamics and Power Platform knowledge, but also sharing my experience on how to better engage with my audience. And this is the first tranche of the work that I'm doing. So by having this sort of interactive videos and slides coming, as well as the time that I'm speaking is part of it. There's some other tricks that I'll talk about a little bit later in the presentation, but I am working on new material. So for example, in July, I'm going to be doing a virtual session for people in Singapore, I believe, that are kids. So I want to have a little bit of interaction with those kids, and I'm thinking about ways of doing it. So if you're interested, follow me, look at the presentations that I'm doing, and there might be some more exciting things coming up. So how am I doing all of this behind me? So this is the first part of the presentation. So I'm using a tool called OBS Studio. OBS Studio is basically takes a video and audio input, processes them, so does some magic to it, and then produces something that you can see on the screen. You can stream from it, you can record the video from it, or you can use it as a virtual camera, which is what I'm doing right now. That's why I'm in spotlight mode, and anything that this software is generating is coming up as a feed, as if it's actually you're looking at a camera. What do I need to do that? I need a good webcam. I've got the 930 Logitech, which is reasonably priced and produces an okay quality. I've got lots of lights around me as well, just to make sure that I'm clear and that the camera is not sort of overcompensating for poor light. But that's just part of it. So the next bit that I've worked on is obviously the content, so my PowerPoint slides, my presentations, and so on. And at some stage, I'm going to do a demo, which is coming from my laptop screen. So all of that is from the video perspective. But what's really important is to have good audio. So if you want to engage best with your audience online, even if the video is not 100%, you don't get the light right, or you're a bit fuzzy, the quality is a bit low, as long as your audio is good, this is what matters the most. At the end of the day, you've got a message that you're transmitting, and you want that message to be loud and clear. So I've got this is a blue Yeti Nano. Again, like average price, not too expensive, but a good quality nonetheless. Hopefully you guys can hear me well. So anyway, I've got all those bits. So the camera, the PowerPoint presentations, and my desktop that I'm going to be projecting when I'm doing a demo. All of that goes into OBS, and OBS then feeds into the Teams video. So behind me, you probably cannot see it right now because it's a green screen. And I'm using OBS to remove the green screen from behind me. So basically, this is what the original picture looks like. I use OBS to extract myself, and it knows because I'm not green. If I was wearing green and I did that by mistake, let me see if I've got something, maybe that will work. Oops, let me just go back here, press the button by mistake. So this is not green enough. I don't have anything green around me, but hopefully I will at some stage. But if you have something green, you're wearing green, you will disappear. So you will blend in with the background. So basically I project myself and then I introduce my slides right in the middle. And then that way I can do what I'm doing right now, which is basically pointing at something that is available in there. And I'm in front of it. So that's why I can put my finger. It's sort of like, if you think about it, like the weather girl when they're presenting on the news what the weather is going to look like. That's the exact same technology that they're using. So hopefully, like, just those few seconds that I spent sort of inspiring you on how to better engage with your audience with a new way of presenting is going to help you work or present better in our current pandemic state, where everything is happening behind the screen and behind a camera. So hopefully it's not just slides that we're talking to. And more recently, actually, they have announced that Teams is going to look slightly different. So they sort of just gave us a quick preview of what Teams is going to look like. And guess what? It's exactly what I'm doing right now. So hopefully with time, the technology that I'm using in OBS Studio and the green screen is going to be replaced with something that is a little bit more out of the box. So obviously there is a little bit of setup that I'm doing in here, but in the future that might be just your experience that you get from Teams. So I'm one step ahead of them, which is really good. Anyway, so this is the first part that I want to talk about, is how can we improve on our online presentations. So the next bit that I'm going to talk about is the link to Synapse. So the one thing that I want you guys to get out of this presentation is this. Link to Synapse is the future of enterprise Dataverse analytics. So if you want to do analytics on your data that is available in Dataverse, link to Synapse is the way to do it. So what I'm going to walk you through today is different ways of exporting your data from Dynamics 365 into another environment, and why link to Synapse is the way to go. So the first one that you might think of is Excel. Excel has been around for a while. Since CRM 4.0, maybe even 3.0, we had a little button in there that you click and you do export to Excel. And that generates an Excel file. And then they had the capability of updating this Excel file, because if you look at the columns, it starts at column D. So A, B, C is actually references to the original record. If you go and update it and then do an upload back to Dynamics 365, then you can update those in bulk using the export to Excel functionality. So that's one way of interacting with your data. Another way is using the APIs or SSIS packages, for example. APIs are great, they're great for integration as well, and they will remain in there and they will be used greatly. But if you want to export large quantities of data, that's probably not 100% scalable. You can use Power Automate, the Power Platform. Power Automate is really fantastic, easy to use, point and click, but again, it might have some shortfalls in terms of scalability and so on. Data export services is a feature that they've introduced probably around 5 years ago, and that allows you to say, I've got my data set, I wanted to put it in that database. So bring your own database, and then you point it to that database, be it a local database that is exposed to the internet, or be it an Azure SQL database. You can select it and you can say export there, and it replicates the data as it is in that database. Fantastic feature, works really great, but again, it might have a little bit of shortfalls. Export to data lake is actually the exact same thing as the links to Synapse. It just has been renamed and it has been enhanced with some new features that were introduced. So let's go through each one of those one by one and talk about the pros and cons of each method that we can use. So starting with Excel. So the Excel is very easy to use. It's out of the box, everybody knows Excel. You download the file and you can start working on it. The second part is it's easy for business users, so you don't really need any programming background or any strong capabilities. But what's really important, especially if you're not exporting the static version of Excel, but a dynamic version from Excel, which keeps in sync with your Dynamics 365, your Dataverse, it respects security. So if you don't have access to a record, that record will not appear on your list, which is exactly what we want. So really great, really robust solution. However, it's limited. you can only do what you can edit in Excel. You can't really use programming per se. You can't do advanced reporting such as Power BI. You can't do really advanced ETL, export, transform, and load. So it does have lots of limitations with Excel. It's highly manual. Again, automation is not something that you can do in it. And then if you've got loads and loads of data, it's certainly not scalable. It's not something to look into. So again, depends on what you're trying to achieve, part of your sort of journey. Excel might be the right solution. We'll decide at the end. The second part that I wanted to talk about is the API and SSIS integration. So APIs by nature are scalable. Every single interaction that you have with your solution is going to be through an API call that is happening at some stage. Again, all of that is something that has been around for a while. It's using industry standards. So if you understand how to call the web APIs, then you'll likely be able to integrate to it, which is quite awesome. It's flexible because everything that you do in the front end can be done through an API call, almost everything. So, if you want to do joins, if you want to do many-to-many relationships, if you want to do assignments, creations, deletes, everything, all of those capabilities are available part of the API calls that you can do in some shape and form. And again, given that it's a direct link to the database, security is respected in there. The downside of APIs is that it's very custom. So you need to understand how to make an API call, how to use those web APIs, what is a REST call, how to authenticate, how to generate your query, and how to get the most out of it. So it can get into the complex side of things. If you want to do something really quickly, it's not going to happen with APIs. And most importantly, if you want to scale it at a really large enterprise level, then you might reach limitations in there, especially when it comes to data analytics. So let's have a look at another option, and that's Power Automate. Power Automate has been very popular recently. People love it because it's very easy to use. It's flexible. There's a lot of things that you can do. Again, it abstracts that complexity from web APIs into something that you can do in a point and click. And again, given that you're connecting straight to the database, it respects security. But when you have to talk about large data that you're loading, many tables that you're sort of moving from one implementation to the other becomes very expensive, and as such, it's not really scalable. It costs a lot of money, so you have to be very careful about what your limitations are, what your entitlements are with Power Automate, and how many calls you're doing. So let's say you've got thousands of updates happening at the same time, and then you've got thousands of Power Automates happening, within minutes, then you're very quickly going to exhaust your usage of your Power Automate allowance, and then you're going to have to upgrade to larger licenses and so on. So from a cost perspective, not really efficient. And again, like if you're looking at really large enterprise solutions, probably not the way to go. Data export services, when I was introducing it, I was, made it sound really interesting, and it is a good option. The only problem is that Microsoft is not investing in data export services anymore. So all the new changes that are happening in the data export to data lake or the link to Synapse. So right now it's fully supported. It's an option that you can take if you want to. It's very simple. You just tell it the database is over there, and then it generates the database for you. But again, as I said, just be a little bit weary about its whether it's something for a long-term solution and whether it's something that can go beyond a simple database. If you want to do more onto it, then look at other options. So my recommendation is look at export to data lake, not data export services. And the last one is link to Synapse. So what do we get with link to Synapse? We get something that is extremely scalable. It's actually built for huge amounts of data. We're talking about gigabytes of data, hundreds of gigabytes of data. It's quite flexible in terms of the options that you get with Azure Data Services are quite extensive. And I'll show you some examples later. It's very easy to use. At least getting your data into CSV format or the data lake, it's super easy. And in fact, I'll do the demonstration right in front of you later on when I finish this bit. And then it is enterprise ready. So all the cool stuff that you get with enterprise scale solutions, will be available in there, which is really awesome. If you want to do large transformations, you want to create new data sets that are transformed instantly. If you want to create something that is super fast in terms of querying virtual data, it's all there. It's really, from an analytics perspective, it is the way to go. A couple of shortfalls that come with it. First of all, from a security perspective, given that you're getting a CSV, which is basically a replica of your data, security is not necessarily respected. So not at the granular level that you get in Dynamics 365, but this is part of the analytics experience, is that you have to make sure that your data is well secure to other people. And the other issue, not sure if this is an issue or not, but it requires, especially if you want to take it a step further, some Azure knowledge. When we're talking about Azure Data Factory, when we're talking about Azure Databricks, then that becomes more on the Azure specialty. Even myself, I don't have that expertise. And in order to get it, I have to reach out to an analytics person, ask them whether things can be done in a specific way, and then take it from there. Cool. So how does it work? So you basically have your Dataverse. Dataverse is the database behind Dynamics 365, behind the Power Platform, behind Power Automate. And it's a multi-dimensional database. You might have more than one data set in it. For example, you might have several tables, you might have multiple instances in it. But as you can see, Dynamics 365 feeds its data into Dataverse. Power Apps feeds its data into Dataverse. Power Automate feeds its data into Dataverse. And then what they introduced at Microsoft is that link between Dataverse and the data lake, or the Synapse, the link to Synapse, which we're going to have a look at in a second. So basically, a few clicks, and your data that is available in your relational database in Dataverse is going to be exported as CSV files in Data Lake, which is the most common way of actually generating that data, working with it, and then displaying it using the modern technology that is available. So let's have a look at some of the highlights of Synapse. So first of all, simple and intuitive, as you're going to see shortly. It supports different types of extracts. So the first one is a big bulk extract, followed by updates on the records themselves. So let's say you've got 10 records in there, and then you've updated one of them. That same record is going to be updated on your list. So your list is always going to have 10 records. You delete one, your database or your CSV file is now going to have 9 records instead of 10. So this is one way of doing it. The other way of doing it is the append mode. So that's a file that keeps growing and growing and growing every time you make a change. So you start with 10 records, you update one, you get 11 records. So the 11th one is basically saying, this is the latest version of that record, and you still have the old version in there. You delete it, you get another record, you get 12 records now, and it's basically saying this GUID is deleted. But the advantage of that solution is that you can go back in time and you can have a look at the different versions of that specific record as it got updated or deleted or changed and so on. It's very flexible from a metadata perspective. So you change your metadata, it will reflect straight into those CSV files. So it's just basically a single click where you can visualize all of that data, and I'll show you how it's done. So it keeps the metadata synchronized without any manual intervention. So it keeps everything in sync, basically, and it keeps the snapshots of really large data sets, and it's excellent for analytics scenarios. Cool. So where can it be used? It can be used in Power BI. It can be used with Power BI with the Synapse Analytics Studio. We'll quickly have a look at that. And Data Factory, which is a way of actually extracting the data, transforming it, and loading it somewhere else. And it can also be used with Databricks, which is basically a way of generating virtual data sets in memory really quickly, and then interrogating that data on the fly. So a dynamic data set. So I should have removed that slide because I've got some really nice pictures in here. So all the logos of the different technologies that can be used, and sort of the Azure Data Factory is the one that I really like because it's quite capable in terms of transformation. And then most importantly, the Synapse, the link to Synapse or the Synapse Studio is a very powerful capability that is available in there. So let's have a look at a demo. So I've got in here, so let me quickly switch my screen. So hopefully you guys can see what I've got in there. I've got my Azure subscription on the one hand side, and I've also got my Power Apps. So this is make.preview.powerapps.com. You can go to make.powerapps.com, and it's basically the location where you can do your administration, your configuration of your environment. In there, usually you would get, so I'm selecting a specific environment. So I'm in NZ30. Although it says NZ30, that's actually an instance that is in the US. I just called it NZ30 because that's my naming convention. So you can basically just navigate around. So in the home, you can see, you can create new Canvas apps, model-driven apps. You can go into your solutions and do everything in your solutions. You've got AI Builder, you've got the chatbot and everything. So quite a lot of capabilities that are available in there. And then Power Automate, obviously. But within that data section in here, you've got the Azure Synapse link. When you click on that, it takes a little bit of time to load, but then you will see all the links that you've done in the past, and you can also create some new ones. But before you actually get there, there's a little bit of homework that you have to do on the Azure side to make sure that you've got all the bits that are required in there. So the first thing that I'm going to do is go to my Azure instance. This is my DXC, so I work for DXC. This is the instance that I'm using. I'm using a Visual Studio subscription, so I get about $200 of credit every month that I can play around with for investigation purposes and just to play around with some new features, such as the export to data lake and the Synapse link. So the first thing you have to do is create a storage account. So in here, I can go and create a new, create one. So I clicked on the plus and create. One thing that you have to be certain of is the location, the region where you're creating that storage. In order for it to work with the export to the data lake or the link to Synapse, this region has to be the same region as your Dataverse instance. So as I said, mine was in East US. So I just made sure that it's in East US as well. So let's give it a name, demo storage Gen 4. This is Gen 2. So that's one thing. It's recommended to select the GeoZone redundant storage in here. But then the other thing is for it to work, you have to make sure that you select enable hierarchical namespaces. So hopefully you guys can see that. So I tick that box in here. Hopefully I'm not sort of covering it with my head, but I tick that box in here and that's it. You're ready to go. Click on create. It will check, looks good. And I clicked on create and now it's actually submitting it for creation. So this is the first step. The first step is generating that storage that is going to be used into your Synapse environment. This is relatively quick, so I'm just going to wait a little bit for it to finish that setup. Hopefully it's not going to take a huge amount of time, but that's the prerequisite, as I mentioned. So don't forget to enable the hierarchical setup, and then we'll take it from there. So I've got a question in here. Let's have a look. So could you explain why not connect to Dataverse for analytics, but Synapse instead? This is a very good question, actually. So two reasons. The first one is load. So if you're doing heavy transformations, if you're doing very advanced analytics that requires large data sets, doing the load straight into Dataverse is going to significantly affect your performance. If you have small ones, that's fine. But if you're doing something quite large, then it will affect the performance of your instance. The second one is sort of along the lines of best practice, is if you're actually doing a lot of transformation on the data that you've got, and you have this constant backwards and forwards into your solution. So not just from an analytics perspective, but if you want to take that data transform it, and push it into another environment. So let's say you are doing an integration with event hubs. So push those messages into Event Hub and then publish it to other platforms. If you have, let's say, generating changing the schema. So the Dynamics 365 CE schema is what they call snowflake free schema, which means every table is very well normalized, and then you have to do a lot of links between them in order to get the information that you need. So links are expensive and heavy on a database. If you're actually doing that transformation and then calling the API straight into Dataverse, it might affect the performance, but also you will reach the API limits because you've got 6,000 requests every 300 seconds. And if you reach that limit, then it's going to throttle. You'll stop. You won't be able to use that anymore. Whereas this capability is exporting everything into CSV files, and from the CSV files, you're doing whatever you want in there without any limitations at super fast speed, because you don't have that backwards and forwards with the web APIs, because it's a different component basically, and then generating a new schema, a star-shaped schema, for example, that is used in other parts of the business, for example. So it does have a lot of advantages to export it. But definitely, like, you can do Power BI links straight into Dataverse. That's certainly something that is supported, but it's not a scalable enterprise solution, mainly because all you're doing is just retrieving that data. And in fact, the Power BI analytics is actually using a replica of your data. So I think if you've got the free version, it's going to be refreshed every 24 hours. If you've got the professional version and you're doing Power BI on Dataverse, it's refreshed every hour, whereas the link to Synapse is near real time. So within, I think, based on the tests that I've done, in less than 30 seconds, the data is going to be updated in data lakes. I don't know if I'll have time to do that demo, but we'll talk about it. Hopefully that answered your question. So we've generated the storage. So that's number one. Number two is generate your Synapse workspace. So click on Create in here. And I've got a few in here that I've done just for demo purposes. Again, make sure that you've got the right region. So East US, for example, Dataverse demo Synapse. We're up to 4 now. All right. And in here, it's asking you for the storage. So I'm creating storage 4, and it needs a file system name. So given that this is a brand new one, there's nothing in there. So we'll just create it in here. So this is demo storage, for example. You can give it a different name, doesn't really matter. But when you actually do the export, it's going to go and generate a different file as well. So don't worry about that. And then once we've got that, then the next part is the security question. So as you can see, there's a red asterisk in here, and there's another red asterisk on security as well. And that's because it needs your SQL admin username and password. So let's give it something in here, something simple. I typed it correctly. Right, they do match. And that's it. Click on Create. And then click on Create. And that will then generate our Synapse workspace. So this is the prerequisite that you have to do. That's it. There's nothing else we have to do. So create the storage first, and then generate the Synapse link. That's it. Cool. Once this is done, so this is going to take a little bit of time, maybe up to 5 minutes, I think, to generate everything that is required, especially from the Synapse Studio. But as it's actually doing that, I'm going to go into the make.powerapps.com and then show you how we're going to generate that link in there. The reason why I'm using the preview, this is no secret, like it's not an MVP secret or something like that, but it's available to the public. Some of the public preview features are only available in the make.preview.powerapps. As an example, if you go to solutions, I'm not sure if I do have solutions in here. I actually do, which is great. You can click on a solution, and you will notice that on the left-hand side in here, you're going to get a collapsible navigation with the tables and all of that. This is an enhancement that is only available in the preview. If I switch off the preview, then it goes back to having a drop-down in here, which is not a great experience compared to what you've got in there. So there's a few hidden gems that you get, sorry, as you sort of go onto the preview. But anyway, let's go into the data lake and then the Azure Synapse link. So the data section, sorry, and then Azure Synapse link. Let's see how this is doing. So it's happy with the storage location. Now it's doing the demo bit. All right, let's create a new one. All right, so the first thing that is going to tell you in here is your current environment is East US. So make sure that the storage is one of those. So I cannot create my storage in Oceania and then use an instance that is in East US. The reason why I'm using East US is because I don't have control over where my environment is created at the granular level. So if I go and create something in Oceania, it can be Australia East or it can be Australia Southeast. I don't have control over that. And most of the time it comes up with the one that I don't have access to in terms of location in here because I am using a Visual Studio license, so which is the subscription in here. It doesn't give me access to all the regions to create my solutions everywhere. So this is just a limitation, and the easiest way to do it is just to select US in my example. But if that's a production environment, make sure you get the right region and the right solutions. So in here, you can select your resource group, and then you select your account storage. So I can, at this stage, it's just the storage. So I can select demonstration storage Gen 4, and that will accept it. I can click on next and start setting up the tables. However, there's something that I did not tick yet, and it's that bit in here. Connect your Azure Synapse Analytics workspace in preview. And the moment I actually select that, it's going to come up with a different capability, which is the link to the demo Synapse 4. So right now it's not allowing me to select it because it's still something that is being generated. But eventually when it's going to finish generating it, then it will be a solution that I can select. So we'll wait for that. But in the meantime, let me show you something that I've already implemented before. So as you can see in here, I've replicated those tables, which is accounts and contacts. So let's click on Manage Tables. Right, so in here, you will be able to see all the tables that you've got in your solution that can be exported into your data lake. I'm not using Dynamics 365, I'm using a pure Dataverse. So Dataverse is the subset of Dynamics 365. It doesn't have the first-party apps, which is perfectly supportable with the export to data lake. And as you can see, it's a subset, so it doesn't have all the tables, it just has less tables, basically. But basically, if you want to keep it simple, you can just select whichever table you want, click on Save, and you're done. But there's one capability in here that appears when you click on Show Advanced Configuration Settings. And that's allowing you to do an append only or an in-place export. So as I mentioned before, in-place means that you're going to have one file. That file is going to be updated based on what records you've got in the system. If you've got 10, you will always have 10. If you delete one, you're going to have 9. If you update one, it will update that specific row, right? So this is the in-place export. When you have in-place, which means this is not ticked, you can select between year and month as a partition. This is based on the created on date. So when were the records created? It will partition your exports based on the month when they were created and or the year. Right? So if you say year, it will take all the records that were created in 2021, for example, put them in one file, or the records created in 2020, and put them in one file, and so on. If it's month, it's per month. But the one that I prefer is to tick that box and to say, I want it to append only. Now, unfortunately, that only generates yearly files, not monthly files. Maybe in the future, they're going to update that into something a little bit more granular. But what you get out of that with the append only is a massive file that will have all the records that are created in 2021. And as those records get updated, a new line is added into your CSV file. And that way you can go back and have a look at the history behind them at different points in time. So again, if you're using something like Databricks or the Data Factory, you can go and decide how to treat those records, how to look at those historicals, and how to maybe look at trends over time on how things are changing. Whereas if your solution is more lenient towards a Power BI report that you're trying to build, then maybe the in place is the way to go, because then you can make sure that you only have the latest version of the record. So let's say you've got a contact called Rami in your file. If you do the append, you might end up with 2 Ramis or 3 or 4 or more as you do the updates into those records. If you run Power BI on that, it will give you the 4 records. You probably don't need that if you're doing a Power BI report. But again, it all depends on the solution that you're trying to do. You can mix and match, that's for sure. So you can have some of them as append and some of them as in place. More to the point, you can have multiple exports of the same tables. So as I showed you in here, this one is exporting accounts. And if I go back and I select on this one, then this one is going to export accounts. And again, one can be in place, the other one can be append, and they can be in different storages. So depending on which exercise you're doing, you can pick the one or the other. So you can mix and match them if you want to. All right, so this is created. Hooray. All right, so let's go and so click on link to Synapse, go back here. Hopefully I'll be able to create it now. Let's try, finger crossed. No, for a reason, I think I got maybe the East US, so I got one of the regions wrong, so maybe there's something that I did wrong. But that's okay, it doesn't matter. We already have the exports done in here. So once we've set those up, let's go and have a look at what does the export look like in Azure. So I'm going to select, first of all, the storage, and I think it was storage to this one. All right, so this is my storage. This is the one that we created. Go to Storage Explorer. And in here, you'll have your containers. I can expand that. And this is the export that I've done. So Dataverse NZ30, and then it has a unique identifier next to it. And remember, I did accounts and contacts. So now I'm going to have both of those as folders. I can double click into those, and I'm going to get the CSV file that is available right here. And as I said, this is in append mode, and it's a yearly append mode. So I get 2021 in here, which is when all my records were created. If I go back, so this is a typical data lake structure. So you've got folders representing all the different tables, and you've got a CSV file that will have your partition data in it. But what's really interesting, and to show you that this is near real time, there's a trickle feed in here. Athena is actually the project name. So in Microsoft, they call the export to data lake, they call it Project Athena. So you might see Athena here and there. Maybe after the preview, they removed that. But this is a trickle feed. So as things get changed, those files get changed in here, especially in the accounts and so on. So you will see those updated dynamically and then changed, deleted, refreshed. They're constantly going to be changing in here. Cool. So that gives us access to the CSV file. This is nothing but a blob storage currently available in your storage. So let's actually have a look at what does that Synapse look like. So Azure Synapse Analytics, and let's go to the oldest one. Yeah, you see, I created it in the wrong, East Australia. It went to East Australia, and that's why it's not picking it up. Okay. So this is the your Synapse environment. And one thing you will notice is that on this side right here is going to have a serverless SQL endpoint, and we'll give you that URL in there. And we also have the username and password to connect to SQL. So basically, if you take that and then start SQL Management Studio and then link to that, it would look as if you're connecting to a normal database. But actually, what it's doing is using the power of Synapse to make it look like a database where you can use T-SQL and so on, but it's all CSV files under the hood. The next thing you can do is open Synapse Studio. So let's click on that and let's have a look at what that looks like. So this is where the magic will happen. Right, so expanding that, you've got access to your data. And again, it's going to look like a database. You're probably going to see something familiar in here in terms of the naming convention that is used for that data that is available. And then once we select them, then we can run our queries on them. So you see, this is the exact same name that we saw before, Dataverse underscore NZ30 underscore unique name, unique identifier. And in here, you're going to have your tables. I'm going to say, you know what? I want to run a SQL query, and I want to get the top 100 rows. It knows the schema, and it has access to the data. So all I have to do is run. And that looks as if you're in SQL Management Studio running a normal query into your database. But in fact, what you're doing is connecting to the data lake, and you're interrogating those CSV files, and you're getting the data out. So this is what it looks like. And then you can run all your analytics in here as well. And I'm pretty sure you can use Management Studio to do this stuff as well. But this is just part of the story. So the next bit is to enhance it. So you can have scripts, for example, or you can have some more advanced features. So let's see if there's anything in integrate. No items to show in here. SQL scripts. All right, so as you can see in here, you can create data flows, you can create notebooks, you can create many different things. Let's have a look at this one. Yep, the list in here, no. So anyway, this is where you would have things like the Databricks. So if you want to create a virtual table in memory, and again, with Databricks, you can manage, you can transform hundreds of gigabytes in just a few seconds. So basically, your model is constantly changing just by using some of those capabilities. And sort of notebooks is basically what is used. So Spark, Apache Spark is, I believe, what Databricks uses. Notebooks is what is used in the export, the data factory. So this is where you want to do some ETLs. You want to make changes to your model. You want to sort of transform it and then load it into another database, or you want to push it into Event Hub and so on. You would use things like Notebook or Data Flow specifically. So again, like from an enterprise perspective, it's quite a robust solution. It scales very well, and it allows you to do things that are beyond the different options that I saw that we sort of looked at earlier from an export to Excel perspective, from an export to data services. It's scalable. It does gigabytes in seconds. And it has many, many, many different connections to all different types of modern infrastructure to integrate with other systems that are available in there. So from a sort of general capability, if you want enterprise scale, this is the way to go. And the last bit that I just want to sort of quickly demonstrate is the manage. So if you go into manage, then you've got some access controls that you can select and credentials to give people access to your environments and so on. So this is where you would basically configure it to make sure everything works as expected. Right. So very quickly, I'm just going to go back to my slides. Just make sure. Whoop, whoop, whoop. All right. Okay. So just to conclude, the question is probably which one is the correct one that you want to select? Is it Excel? Is it the APIs? Is it the data export services? Or is it Data Lake and the link to Synapse? At the end of the day, it depends on what you're trying to achieve. So if you want something that is more business friendly, that users can use it and just do an export, do a middle change and push it back, Excel is the way to go. If you've got sort of inter-system communication where you've got real-time data or interrogation, for example, updating a record and then pushing some record somewhere else at a lower level, not something that is huge in terms of all the entities, then the APIs or Power Automate is the way to go. Data export services, so DES, not DSC, I would recommend against it. It's still supported. Feel free to use it. But as I said, Microsoft is not investing in it. And again, it's not a secret. It's something that Microsoft has said openly. And again, if you want something that is at the enterprise level, you want to do large transformations, you want to push data around, the data lake, export to data lake or link to Synapse is the way to go. So just a few resources that are available in there. Those are most of the official links that I managed to get from Microsoft that cover the Synapse link to Dataverse, or Dataverse link to Synapse. It's quite comprehensive. So most of the stuff that I talked about in terms of setting it up, making sure you've got the right privileges and the right location and so on is defined in there. If you're interested in just the how I did my presentations in terms of having me superimposed on top of the slides behind me, and then the sort of all the different bits, I've got that video as Better Presentation 1. So it's a shortened bit.ly link, but I've got that video on YouTube basically going step by step on how I used OBS and how I set it up to actually get it to work. And with that, that's the end of my presentation. So if you guys have any questions, feel free to ask me. And Faisal, otherwise, I'll hand it over to you.
Thank you. It was a great presentation, Rami.
Cool. Thank you. Thank you, Vishal, as well.
And I really love the concept. It feels like you are giving the in-person presentation.
Yeah.
Because this is what we have been missing in last all these virtual presentations. Like we are not getting the people more interactive. So,
Absolutely.
But it's really good, really good.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, I got one question with regards to the data lake here. So we talked about getting the data out of the customer engagement application, not specifically customer engagement, but we're getting data from the Dataverse. So if we want to utilize the same Azure data lake for the different applications, specifically from finance and operations side, so can we use the same Azure data lake to get data from different sources?
Yes, yes. I believe the pattern is the same for finance and operation, and this is a very good example, by the way. I'm currently working for one of the financial institutions in Wellington, and that's exactly what we're doing. So we've got many systems. Yeah. And all of them are customer centric. So you've got that customer that is represented in Dynamics 365 CE, maybe in FNO, it's represented in a bespoke application, in another application, and they have some unique identifiers to link them together. However, from a reporting analytics perspective, I want the holistic view of all of that. So this is what they do. They export that data into different data lakes or into a data lake with different storages. And then they use all the capabilities of Databrick or the Data Factory to merge all of that data and give them that single view of the customer, which is exactly what you're talking about. And it's sort of like sort of in line with the question that Vishal is asking is, if I want to have an integration with another system, can I use this? Yes, you can. So if you're sending the information from Dynamics 365 into a different environment, certainly you can do that. And in fact, this is what it's built for. It's definitely not a point-to-point. So it's not that, the one is calling this API, the other one is calling this API. There's a little bit of work that is happening in the middle. So you first export it into your data lake. It gets into specific CSV format. You then go and generate the files or the format that you need, and then you push it into another environment that then links it to your system. And again, this is what we're doing with the bank that I'm currently working on. And our specific example is a complaint has been raised. So someone goes into Power Portals and then put in a complaint about something that has happened. That generates a record in Dataverse, right? So this is one way of doing it. Dataverse then exports it into the data lake. Data lake then transforms that data, and then the data lake or the data factory pushes that information into Event Hub. Event Hub is a messaging system with topics. There's another system listening to Event Hub, picks up that message, and then goes and deals with it. So a little bit of work that is required in there, but it does work that way. Now, regarding the two-way integration, I don't think this would be the ideal solution, because all it does is just export it into Synapse or into the data lake. It doesn't push it back. So you will have to use the API route to push the information back in there. So probably not the best. I can see Adrian has his hand up. I hope that's the Adrian that I know.
Hey, Rami. Yes, it's
Hey,
me.
how's it going?
Very good, man. Good to see you.
Yeah, good to hear your voice. By the way, we're hiring.
Yes, good to know. Yeah, actually, I am working on a kind of a similar project, and it's interesting. I feel you got me interested when you mentioned that you're using Data Factory to merge different sources to produce like a holistic view. And so, what do you do when you have requirements that expect to have a real-time data or near like, or I imagine that has a price, that process.
Absolutely. It depends on the size of your data. And funny enough, that's exactly what I'm working on right now at the bank. And I've got some really good people helping me in that space. We haven't found the answer yet. The best we managed to do is 1 minute delay. It took about 30 seconds. So the link to Dataverse, to Data Lake is fast. So within 10 seconds, I think you would see the data replicated in there. But our Data Factory took about 30 seconds to trigger. Yes. And then once Data Factory generated the data, then it pushed it to the next environment. And for it to process on the other side took another 30 seconds. So we had a 1 minute delay, basically. However, we are investigating doing it using Databrick. And the other thing we're investigating is enabling, and I'm not sure whether this is best practice or not, but in Dataverse, you can go into the plugin registration tool and you can say, whenever there's a change on that specific entity, a message change, so a create, an update, delete, whatever, go and write something into a queue, into an Azure Service Bus or into Event Hub. So this mechanism is actually the same thing that is being used in the export to Data Lake. So the idea behind it is that we will enable this, and then we will consume the data straight from Event Hub and then push it to the next environment, hopefully making it a little bit faster. But keep that thought. Give me another 2 weeks, and I'll come back with a definite answer. What we're working on is large loads of data. So I'm basically, loading 100,000 records multiple times and seeing how well it's behaving and whether it's starting to throttle or start sort of queuing up the requests. So we're in that process right now, but yeah, give me a couple of weeks and I'll come back with an answer.
Gonna be looking forward to that. We are using probably another approach that is a variation of one of the ones that you listed. We are using Parquet files and loading those. So we noticed that if we load those files from Synapse and we use an open rosette and the Parquet file is big, it performs better. But we drop in real time. So what we have is a Spark job that kind of consolidates them on a scheduled basis. Yeah. So what is more recent performs worse than what is older because it's not consolidated yet.
Right. Right. And yeah, so the Parquet file is something that we're investing in as well. So looking at different formats, how it can land. The problem that we had is that our account table was 2 gigabytes large. And when you do the append, you've got a 2 gigabyte file that keeps growing and growing. And then every time you use the Data Factory to process that, you're actually processing a 2 gigabyte file. It works, but the amount of resources that is required to do that is huge because every time it has to scale, and it's doing that all the time. So those are the bits that we're working on. Unfortunately, my expertise is not really in the Azure and the analytics space. So that's why I said I've got a couple of really bright people that know that very well and are helping me in that space. So once I've got the answer, I'll come back to you and give it to you.
Awesome. Cool, man.
Yeah. We'll catch up for a bit.
Cool. Nice presentation, by the way.
Yeah, thanks for that. Cool. Cost implications with Synapse. So I think, if I'm not mistaken, and then maybe Adrian can help in that space, but it's storage. So you've got your data lake storage, and this is cost by terabyte, I think, if I'm not mistaken, or by gigabyte. It's relatively cheap, but if I'm not mistaken, it's the storage. But then any processing that you do, heavy processing, will require resourcing power, and that costs money as well. Don't quote me on the exact prices in that space because I think mileage might vary. Is that right, Adrian? Did I get it right?
I would say so, yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Sounds good. Cool. Right. Awesome.
Excellent. Thank you.
Cool. So
I don't see any more questions there. It was a great presentation. New learning stuff.
cool.
There's so much to learn now.
Yeah, it's massive, and like keeping on top of it is also very difficult. Like trying to understand what is coming up and whether I'm using the latest or the greatest is also a challenge as well. So no, it's massive. It's massive. But the other thing I want to say is that the demand has never been higher. People that are currently working in Dynamics 365 and Power Platform are in a sweet spot. They are very lucky because there's an absolute shortage of people in the market. Charles Lamana, who is the one of the CVP, so he's a vice president at Microsoft looking after the Power Platform and specifically the low-code, no-code platforms. He's saying that 97% of the Fortune 500 companies are using the Power Platform. Now, those companies are the innovators. If they are using it as the innovators, then everybody's going to follow that innovation. And it's a massive 97% of them are using it, which means that the majority of the market is going to start using those. So it's absolutely crucial that people that have those skills, make yourself visible, make yourself available. And if you're keen, like in New Zealand, especially with the pandemic, we have no people coming into the country to help us with those implementations. So it's becoming like very important, and it's almost like a bid war. So if you know those technologies, they're going to pay you anything just to come and work for an organization in New Zealand. There is shortage and there is demand for it. So look up for those job opportunities. If you're keen to travel, come to New Zealand or to Australia. There's lots of work in there. And those are the links, not formatted properly, but I just copied paste them from the presentation. I'll see if I can do that in a better font, hopefully. No, I cannot format them, unfortunately. But yeah, the links are in the chat. Cool.
All good. Thank you. Thank you again, Rami.
All right. We've got one more question. Someone put their hand up.
Yep, sure.
I just put my hand, not for the question. Thanks for the amazing organization and session, Faisal, Rami. I think so. I live in Germany, but we are from the same location as origin. I am from Turkey.
Okay. Neighbors.
Neighbors, yeah. And hope to see you again in next session. Nice. I am a member of the Pakistan user group, but timely sometimes it's not possible against the morning.
Yes. Yeah. And having different time zones is always challenging. That's why maybe we can try to have them at different times as well. In New Zealand, we usually do them midday, but that would be even earlier for you. So it will be like in the middle of the night. But it's worth it. It's worth it.
No, it's worthwhile. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that's what I was about to say. It's worthwhile. So so just the closing here. I'm also pasting a link here for our Pakistan user group. So do have a look and find out. It will be really helpful for the people who really wants to join our upcoming event. And as I said in the start, it's a big exciting news, like who is coming as a keynote speaker. And not only the keynote speaker I'm focusing on, Rami is also going to speak in this particular event. So that's for sure. And lots of people from Microsoft and MVPs and top class speakers, I would say. Everyone is top class speaker who is just doing the presentation. For me, it's a top class speaker. It's not easy to speak a virtual events. So do join us on the very last day of July. So do check the link in the chat window and do register. And if you want to speak, submit your session now. You still have time.
Sounds good.
Well, good. Thank you so much, Rami, and everyone again for making this event so much successful. Thank you, and speak to you soon.
Thanks, guys. Thank you for all the attendees. Cheers. Thanks, Faisal. Bye.
Bye.